In this video I will present you my favorite passages from Beethoven's first 8 of 32 piano sonatas. I'm not using musical examples in this video, but I'm putting links with timestamps at the correct position in the description. For the first sonata, opus 2 number 1 in F minor, I go to the second movement. It maybe is the least innovative of the four movements, but for this video this doesn't matter. Being the typical slow movement, it's very lyrical and highly sensitive. My favorite passage is the beginning of the movement until the second cadence to F major. These are characteristic features of the music. Sighing suspensions / pretty emphasized dissonant passing tones, which Beethoven both uses very extensively. The careful handling of rhythmic and textural variety without making it too complicated. A well-formed melody, smooth parallel sixths, some grace notes or ornamentation, and a little bit of chromaticism. Taking a further look, the first 8 measures have a typical symmetrical 2+2+4 period with 2 half cadences and a perfect cadence. We have a pretty melodic line blossoming out in measure 6. The rhythmic tempo gets a little more lively towards the end. In measure 9 the texture gets more flowing by common broken chords accompaniment, but with a fuller sound due to the held pedal tone underneath. Lyricism continues and leads into an intimate climax in pianissimo. Beethoven does not simply stay on the lower register with the accompaniment, but gives it a beautiful rising shape. Here the, in my opinion, most expressive suspension of the whole piece follows. It is this 9/4 suspension that appears right after the already known parallel 6th chain. In difference to the two appearances above, the suspension lays on the subdominant and not on the dominant. In the second sonata, opus 2 number 2 in A major, I took a passage from the fourth movement. The movement has rondo form, like so there is an A-B, A-C, A-B, A plus coda structure. I picked the final A and maybe a little bit of the coda. The passage I chose uses the main thematic material of A in a different way. The music is, again, very lyrical and idyllic. My favorite part starts with the main theme's characteristic joyful ascending A major arpeggio and its following large falling interval. Some embellishments are added after. Later this rising broken chords motif appears in a new area with knocking chords accompaniment. But the main reason I chose the passage is the bridge in between. Here Beethoven surprisingly switches chromatically to the dominant of the mediant-related F major, which gives the music a new color with a little bit of tension, but in a charming way that adds to the idyll of the movement. Especially beautiful is when the music then goes back to A major, letting off to pure joy in a simple change between tonic and dominant with these knocking chords that I already mentioned. In sonata number 3 in C major, I chose a passage from the brilliant first movement. It is, as usual, in sonata form. Like so, it has an exposition, a development section and a recapitulation. In this case, there is a long coda after the recapitulation. Instead of just finishing off the movement quickly, Beethoven throws in a cadenza and extends the movement, respectively the cadence to C major. This is more common in a concerto, so in a work for soloist with orchestra, than in a solo sonata. It is initiated by a deceptive cadence to the flat 6 chord, so to A flat major, and reaches the typical cadential dominant 6/4 chord in the middle. Created is a feeling of an improvisation of the soloist while the orchestra pauses. After reaching the tonic of C major back again, the final cadence is prepared. I chose this as my favorite passage, but I also want to include the cadenza before. So, after the cadenza, it starts with the Beethoven typical short main motive of the movement, and then makes clear that the direction urges towards the end. I really like this expressive arching line with these alternating syncopes and like so, suspensions in both hands. Then an acceleration in the rhythmic and harmonic tempo follows, running downwards. Now the final cadence could already follow, but this wouldn't be enough. So instead Beethoven makes use of a deceptive cadence to A minor, and a beautiful contrasting pianissimo. After an expectant pause, the music lets off to the brilliant cadence. Using the wide range of the piano, he massively prepares a staggered octaves unison with an orchestral tutti vibe, which is already familiar from the exposition, by the way. In Sonata number 4, opus 7 in E-flat major, I chose the C minor middle part in the final rondo right after the reappearance of the pastoral-sounding main theme. It has a massive, banging and triumphant sound, or is maybe perceivable as a fight against personal struggle. The whole thing is highly impressive. This idea here seems very similar to that of the rondo of the second sonata, where there is also a beastly minor middle part in between of and apart from that idyllic soundscape. So in this middle part here of the fourth movement of the fourth sonata, we have a strong texture due to thick chord blocks and a persistent figuration in fortissimo. The figuration stays alive all the time, appearing either in the bass or at the top or simultaneously. The slow harmonic tempo in the beginning sets huge statements. When the music then goes to the relative major, the music gets a more bouncing quality. Beethoven sets naughty stresses on the weak beats, while the harmonic tempo is 4 times faster. The second part provides further development. It starts highly dramatic, beginning on the secondary dominant of 4, progressing into a half cadence in C minor. There the figuration above is, in comparison to what we've heard before, more free, while the left hand gets a more singing and lamenting quality. Then, after 2 bars of a C minor restart, the secondary dominant of 4 kicks in again. The figuration switches back to the top to form another more free and apparently typical before a final cadence, arching line. For any reason, after the cadence I very much like this alternation or written out trill between the B natural and the C that initiates the repetition. In Sonata number 5, opus 10 in C minor, I picked the narration in the first movement's recapitulation. The recapitulation is always kind of a repetition of the exposition, but more or less different in some aspects. After the brutal opening theme with a C minor cadence, the transition starts in the distant G-flat major. There we have a very pleasant syncopated subject whose lyricism forms a contrast. It switches to E-flat minor. I especially want to highlight the now following enharmonic modulation. It's very expressive and makes use of the ambiguity of the dominant 7th, in this case of G-flat major, writing it as an augmented 6th chord that can like so move into a different direction with a new color, which is in this case C major as the dominant of F minor. Very nice is also how the homophony then switches to a little bit of polyphony by letting the middle voice emerge during a sequential process. The narration gets even more interesting by using a major third after 4 measures. Like so, the expected F minor as the subdominant of the home key becomes major. The following theme, like so, is a more joyful one, as in the exposition. After 14 measures of this, it eventually suddenly turns into the expected F minor, and then back to C minor. Like so, the composer's task to reach back to the home key, in difference to the exposition where it goes to the relative major, is solved. This example shows that Beethoven does that in a highly creative way, I think. For Sonata number 6, opus 10, number 2 in F major, I go to the third movement, which is a Fury presto. My favorite passage is in the development, so starting right at the beginning of its second part. It turns from C major into the median key of A flat major. The music is very passionate and gets dramatic. This ubiquitous motive creates a Beethoven-typical feeling of persistence. Beethoven makes use of contrapuntal writing by letting the motive occur in different voices or simultaneously between 2 voices to avoid redundancy. Also, he rushes through different minor keys. At first it moves to B flat minor and F minor by kind of a sequence of 8 bars. Here I want to highlight a detail. This extension of the motive that exceptionally uses only 16th notes in a bar adds to the drive of the music pointedly. I think that those little details that are less than half a second long can add to the quality of the music enormously. After that, the music gets even more intense. He moves from F minor to C minor to G minor and to D minor, so upwards in the circle of fifths, which underlines the music's forcefulness. The passage ends with a typical dramatic half cadence by an augmented sixth chord with its characteristic 6-5 connection in the bass. In Sonata number 7, opus 10, number 3 in D major, I chose the scary, brutal development near the end of the slow and dark second movement. This passage seems to be a rise of despair, grumbling out of the deep. Starting from D minor, Beethoven turns it over the 6th chord B-flat major into a terrifying E-flat minor. The intensity then increases by several aspects. The harmonic tempo gets faster, the bass line moves up chromatically, and in general the music strives upwards. There are, of course, diminished 7th chords. The texture gets thicker. There is a crescendo from the extreme pianissimo to the other extreme fortissimo, and the rhythmic diminutions become even smaller. At the end, a half cadence releases the listener back into the overall sadness of the movement. In the famous Sonata number 8, opus 13 in C minor, I chose the A-flat major middle section from the final rondo, which I like for its development. The central characteristic feature here is the simple outline of a falling fifth motive. This motive appears in both hands but a third apart to form imperfect consonances and to make it more pleasant in contrary motion. The first 16 bars set a 4-time repetition of a 4-measure phrase that consists of the falling fifths and the following green-marked continuation. It creates a gentle atmosphere. To avoid monotony, Beethoven interchanges the interval directions of the falling fifths motive between the registers. Up, down becomes down, up, and vice versa. Additionally, Beethoven syncopates the motive, gives the texture more voices and an overall rising tendency. The green ending is a little different in version 2 and 4 in comparison to 1 and 3. After an interlude of 4 measures with new material and a little imitation, the falling fifth motive returns at first in the right and then in the left hand. This time staccato figuration is added, triggering the following outburst. In a typical Beethoven manner, the music dramatically turns. By taking F minor as the subdominant, it leads into a brutal and dark half cadence in C minor, killing the tenderness. That's it for this video. I hope you made it up to this point. If so, congratulations, thank you, goodbye.